Here's our second lesson of Chapter 10, Market and Industrial Revolution, Expansion, Moving to the West. How is it that land and water transportation affected westward expansion? And it is going to become a political issue as well. As always, same two sides and viewpoints on things. Here we go. Moving to the West, our first census established by the Constitution shall happen, and it is the power of Congress to do so, is in 1790. There's a listing of an example of names and numbers of people in a particular family taken from somewhere. Population at the time is about 4 million. Most people are living only within about 100 miles from the Atlantic coast, but this is going to change as settlers move further to the west. However, transportation is limited, and it makes it difficult and slow for that move and that population to shift to the west. We need to have people moving to the west. That means economic growth. That means we have to figure out a way to get them there. In 1820, though, with some of those transportation issues being dealt with, we're going to have a population of about 10 million people, and about 2 million of that total number is going to be living west of the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains were a major obstacle to westward movement. Travel is difficult. From New York City to Buffalo, New York, it took 3 weeks time to get from one end of the state to the other in the state of New York. This map shows from 1800 to 1830 how travel times are decreasing within about 20 years into this region. And notice where they're decreasing and in what area. Weeks, days, 5 days for this color, 4 days for that color, so on and so forth. Right along waterways. Right? Waterways are a big deal. Some technological improvements that are helping with that. We're also going to have some man-made improvements that are going to help with that. Our population density, notice where it's increasing, again, along waterways, moving into the west, especially into the north and along major bodies of water as well. This is a bit of a hint and a connection to our market industrial revolution that is happening here. Roads and turnpikes are essential in all this, and there's a picture of a type of road that was being built. There really are no good roads for trade into the west. They need them to get people into the west, who are largely probably going to be farmers in most cases, but you're going to have merchants and people who sell merchandise, maybe trappers and hunters and that kind of stuff, lumber companies and lumberers, all kinds of other things as well. We need to get some transportation out there so that we can get finished manufactured goods from the east to the west, and the goods that are being grown and produced in the west back to the east, those mouths and those people that want to buy them. Well, one of the ways in which this was done originally is through private companies building roads, turnpikes, sound Florida similar to Florida, what's going on in Florida and many other states on the East Coast. That's our life. There's turnpikes up and down the whole state. Most of these roads were established with a crushed stone base in land where there was a lot of muddy areas and lots of swamp or very tough terrain. They would lay down logs, all kinds of trees available for that, side by side like this, and then they would put dirt over the top of those logs. Some of those roads actually floated on top of very muddy, swampy, boggy ground. Ohio asks for support in the creation of a road to their western state, connect the west to the east, and this was considered for them to be essential in order to develop and to grow, to encourage people to move out there, to get some of the fine things and civilized things that people back in the east had access to build their homes and their communities and towns and things like that, and again to sell the produce that is being made there back into the east. Well, Congress in 1806 approved some money for a national road, and that's going to be basically the name of it. It goes from Baltimore, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois, through Columbus, Ohio, and eventually it's going to stretch that span of states, and it's built by people along the way in that particular area. And one of the people that is promoting this kind of thing, especially after the War of 1812, is a Westerner, although he is in a southern state, but Kentucky is still kind of considered to be in the west. He's promoting an idea that is going to utilize the power of the federal government to make this transportation improvement into the west happen. And it's taken on some Federalist ideas. And that is this guy by the name of Henry Clay. He calls it the American system. And this Henry Clay was a war hawk in the War of 1812. If you remember those war hawks, the new Democratic Republicans 2.0 take on some of this Federalist thinking of, one, let's have a protective tariff, tax foreign goods coming into the country to make sure that our industries back here in the East can grow. That's going to be good for Westerners because we're going to use that tariff money to build roads and canals. We're going to make sure there's a national bank to collect the money and to make the payments, and maybe even take out some loans or give out some loans for businesses in the country that want to grow and establish themselves. And if there is a growth of industry back here, that industry needs raw materials and resources from the West. That's going to help Westerners and people in the South and the West as well. A strong federal government is something we want. So this is a Democratic Republican saying we want the tariff and we want to have these things happen because this is the only way in which we're going to be able to get a consistent and established road system into the West. Many Southerners don't necessarily like this in a way. Again, the Jeffersonians who don't see this as a thing that the federal government should do, right? It was proposed by Hamilton, this system of a tariff to protect fledgling industries, a protective tariff, but now this is a tariff that is going to do other things. So essentially it's going to perhaps be increased or raised for internal improvements like this. And as we talked about before, the same argument and concern there is that this national bank that's going to get renewed in 1816 is a scary thing, and some opposed it, but it is going to get renewed and it is going to be established for about another 20 years after that. And the result of this in this American system are some roads, again, not all of them funded by the federal government, but turnpikes and things like that. But one of the concerns here is that it takes big money and a lot of money to get a road to connect one side of the country to the other. And maybe one state wants to have a road, but maybe over here in Indiana, they're not enthused about building another road or a road at all. And so therefore, if the states just do it whatever they want, then you're going to have a patchwork of roads that only go within the states and maybe lead not to many places and don't connect the country in the regions and the different things that each of the regions can develop, produce that are needed by the other regions. And so we have people objecting because this plan and doing this kind of thing is not specifically written in the Constitution, that strict constructionist argument. They fear a growth of federal government power, and this kind of power should be only reserved for the states and local governments. But again, efficiently connecting the roads with some sort of functioning system from one side of the country to another, it's difficult from a Democratic Republican, new Democratic Republican, federalist-minded Democratic Republican who says we need to have the federal government take control of this. And they will argue that, yes, we can, because of the fact that we have this necessary and proper clause. And this is something that is good for the welfare and the benefit of the country. So Congress can do this, and essentially they do some of these things. Now, we're going to look at later on when we get into class here this thing called the Erie Canal. This is one of the most significant internal improvements that spurs a series of other massive improvements like canals and other roads because of it, because people start moving out into areas here of the West because of this canal. And it was considered to be a major feat of human engineering and work endeavor. We'll take a look at who built it and why it's so significant and how it connects the country significantly. And this canal system and movement on the water created by man was necessary because when you look at the geography of the United States, there is a problem. And that problem is that rivers run basically north and south. They don't go east to west. And so many of these canals are going to move east to west. They're going to connect the Great Lakes to other river systems and move north and south as well, creating a flow of transportation with the rivers and the lakes and the canals, and some roads being built east to west as well. So thus the road system was important because of how these river systems worked. They just weren't set up to go east and west. Nature didn't make it that way. And of course, traveling on canals and by river whole lot more comfortable and less bumpy than the roads of the day. Not fun and very slow. And at the same time, when you think about time and distance, we're going to go back to this just quickly for a second. When you think about time and distance, time travel in 1800 and trying to get something to market from out here in this green area to there, right? 2 weeks. That means your thing, whatever it is you have produced out here, is going to be more expensive because the time and the difficulty of getting it there. If I can decrease the amount of time that it takes to get my produce to the East Coast, then I can make a cheaper product that more people are going to buy, and I can be more competitive as a producer and make more money. That's good for me, for sure. So let's go back to where we were before. So river travel, one of the things that helps conquer nature and her limited directional setup of rivers and moving up and down them is this thing called the steam engine. You read about this and you wrote some notes on this. In the 1780s to the 1790s, power to get up rivers is very limited. The rivers are very strong in their current. The power of the small steam engines of the day prior to Robert Fulton's steam engine was adequate for small rivers, but there's a lot of big rivers out there and fast running water, and it wasn't powerful enough. And so his boat is powerful, it's big, it's faster, it shuts down the time and distance factor significantly. This means the cost of produce and goods is going to go down. The supply of them is going up as well because of that, and also driving the price down. And he makes this famous trip from New York City to Albany up the Hudson River in just a handful of hours compared to days on any other kind of a boat, or a sailboat at least. So these steamboats are massively important in westward expansion, and it is an age of and unto itself. Massive amounts of goods are shipped on them. People are put on them, moving them through from like places like the New Orleans up the Gulf, up the Mississippi River, up the Ohio River. Helps establish many city and river towns like Cincinnati and St. Louis, on Louisville on the Ohio River. By 1850, this is a major industry where you've got about 700 steamboats in the United States. They actually are pretty dangerous things. They tended to explode and capsize because they got overloaded and have fires on them and things like that. And again, this is good, but it's limited to our rivers going and running pretty much only north and south. This guy, DeWitt Clinton, is going to develop and push for this Erie Canal. And again, we're looking at it in a video clip more specifically later on. And it's going to link New York to the Great Lakes, and then the Great Lakes eventually are going to have other canals built off of them so that they're connected to all the other rivers in the west and the south, the Ohio, the Mississippi. So essentially you can make a big, great circle from New York City through the west and the northwest, down the Mississippi River, out the Gulf of Mexico, and back again. And this is going to put New York City on the map majorly in the world, and it's going to be a huge boost economically to them and to New Orleans and to the rest of the country and the interior of the country. Building on the Erie Canal, we got thousands of laborers doing this work. Most of them tend to be Irish workers. They built 363 miles of canal within about 2 years. It had a series of locks and dams set up for it and on it, and this was set up so that with the changing elevations, you had basically a step system and a door and ladder kind of a system set up here, so that a set of gates would open up, a boat would float in, you close the gates, you fill that area up with water, you raise the boat up to the next level, you open the gates, and you do it all over again until you get to the next level, and you sail on. And 1825 it opens, and so here is that Erie Canal, and eventually some other canals are going to be connecting to the Ohio River and then also out to the Mississippi River later on. This is a big deal. Most of what's traveling on here, and it operates for a very long time. This operates by a system of barges. Steamboats, powered boats don't operate here on the canals because they create a lot of wash and splash on the shore and causing erosion, and that erosion then causes the canal to fill in. What you have here are mules and horses and oxen pulling by rope with young boys or people leading those animals up and down the river from one point to the other to get the produce and the goods in and out and around the country. By 1850, we're going to have about 3,600 miles of canals. And again, this is lowering the cost of shipping, the time, the supply increases. It's linking the regions, especially the north and the west, more so than anything else. And that is going to be impactful with our developments leading to our Civil War. The north and the west are going to have more of a relationship, an economic relationship and connections than the north and the south, even though cotton is important to the north, as we talked about before. Here's what the country basically looks like here when we get to about the year 1820. We'll pick up with that in our next lesson on westward expansion and some issues that end our era of good feelings. Our era of good feelings has all this economic growth and these new technologies and developments in the interior. It's creating some stresses. We'll talk about some of the other stresses that kind of cause us to all of a sudden develop and fraction out into competing political parties again. And we're fighting with each other about everything more and more all the time. Good day. Make hay, get some left side reflection done, make a little snap chart for yourself. Could be a simple little mind map. See you next time. Bye-bye.